They're not Israeli ships. They're just random ships that where they drove their little speedboats up to and shot at those ships with AK-47s. Anyone with a speedboat, a gun, and the wrong intentions can do that. They know that we, the United States of America, control the flow of global shipping. And we know that they don't. Their real navy is at the bottom of the Arabian Gulf. It's worth saying again, for 47 years, Iran has been at war with America, killing our citizens, our soldiers, and our allies, while previous administrations looked the other way. The real endless war is the war that Iran has waged on us for 47 years. President Trump is the only president with the guts and moral clarity to finally do something about it. Today, we have all the time in the world, and we're not anxious for a deal. And I hear him say it every day in private as well. Iran knows that they still have an open window to choose wisely. As we said previously, choose wisely at the negotiating table. All they have to do is abandon a nuclear weapon in meaningful and verifiable ways, or instead they can watch their regime's fragile economic state collapse under the unrelenting pressure of American power. A blockade as long as it takes, whatever President Trump decides. Because the bottom line remains the bottom line. Iran will never get a nuclear bomb. The choice is theirs, but with this blockade, the clock is not on their side. Moreover, President Trump has authorized the United States Navy to destroy any Iranian fast boats that attempt to put mines in the water or disrupt passage through the Strait of Hormuz, to shoot and kill. Our commanders have clear rules of engagement. If Iran is putting mines in the water or otherwise threatening American commercial shipping or American forces, we will shoot to destroy. No hesitation, just like the drug boats in the Caribbean. It's also worth saying, this should not be America's fight alone. We barely use the Strait of Hormuz as a country. Our energy doesn't flow through there, and we have plenty of energy. Just look at the new global Congo line, headed to Texas. A beautiful picture. Europe and Asia have benefited from our protection for decades, but the time for free riding is over. America and the free world deserve allies who are capable, who are loyal, and who understand that being an ally is not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. We are not counting on Europe, but they need the Strait of Hormuz much more than we do, and might want to start doing less talking and having less fancy conferences in Europe and get in a boat. This is much more their fight than ours. On this core mission, America's will is unshakable, our capabilities unmatched. Our blockade is only growing and going global. And as the President said, we have all the time in the world. Iran has a historic chance to make a serious deal, and the ball is in their court. Either way, the War Department stands ready for what comes next, locked and loaded. May God continue to bless our warriors each and every day and on each and every mission. Mr. Chairman, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Today marks 55 days since the President of the United States ordered major combat operations against Iran. Today and this morning, the Joint Force remains postured and prepared to recommence major combat operations on the order of the President. On April 8th, the President announced a ceasefire, and last week, at the President's direction and on order of the Secretary, U.S. CENTCOM began enforcing a blockade against all commercial vessels going into and out of Iran and their ports. Simultaneously, the U.S. military, in support of the U.S. Department of Justice, was ordered to conduct maritime interdiction operations against sanctioned and dark fleet vessels globally. This operation also began on April 8th, and what I'd like to do this morning is update all of you on those actions and activities. First, as I mentioned, U.S. Central Command continues to maintain a strict blockade on all the ports. We're enforcing the blockade across the board against any ship of any nationality that is transiting to or from an Iranian port or territory. We're closely tracking vessels of interest headed towards Iran and those moving away from Iran that were outside the blockade area when this blockade was ordered. And as everyone saw this past weekend, we're prepared and postured to intercept them. As of this morning, 34 ships have met the U.S. blockade and made the wise choice to turn around. One ship did not, and that ship was the motor vessel Tusca. Over several hours this past Sunday, April 19th, the U.S. conducted maritime interdiction operations against the Tusca, whose crew attempted to breach the blockade line. The Tusca is a large container ship, about 965 feet long, or about the same size as a United States Navy aircraft carrier, and over 100 feet wide. The operation began about 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time when the United States Navy destroyer approached her, and the crew and the vessel ignored warnings. And I've described how the destroyer force is operating in the area prior. Upon intercept and coming within visual range, American forces began to issue several clear and unambiguous warnings and inform the vessel and their crew that they were in a violation of the U.S. blockade and directed the ship to turn around. Over a 6-hour period, the vessel and her crew repeatedly ignored U.S. warnings. And then the U.S. Navy destroyer executed a series of pre-planned, carefully calibrated escalation options, including firing 5 warning shots. The vessel and her crew continued to ignore warnings. And after exhausting all other measures, CENTCOM authorized disabling fire against the Tusca. U.S. sailors warned the crew of the Tusca to abandon the engine room, and at approximately 9 a.m. Eastern Time, the destroyer disabled the Tusca's engine by firing 9 inert rounds from the destroyer's Mark 45 5-inch guns precisely into the engine room and engine space on board the Tusca. Not surprisingly, the vessel then reported issues with their engine, went dead in the water, and began to comply with U.S. directions and orders. At 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, CENTCOM ordered United States Marines to seize the ship. Via helicopters, U.S. Marines maneuvered quickly to the disabled ship, boarded her from fast ropes via helicopter infiltration methods, and took custody of the ship. The ship and her crew remain safe in U.S. custody today. Let me now turn to global operations in the Pacific, and I want to highlight that this is a major interagency effort between the United States military, the White House, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Justice. On Monday, April 20th, U.S. Indo-PACOM forces, in support of a Department of Justice request, interdicted the motor tanker Tiffany, which was transporting sanctioned Iranian oil. The Tiffany is a very large crude tanker, VLCC for short, and is also about the size of a U.S. aircraft carrier and capable of transporting approximately 2 million barrels of oil. At approximately 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time, U.S. military forces and law enforcement forces also went to the ship via rotary wing platforms, fast roped onto her deck, and secured her. After the ship was secured, a U.S. Navy control team embarked aboard the Tiffany, and assumed control of the ship at 4 a.m. Eastern Time on April 21st. A Navy control team is comprised of sailors led by a boarding officer that assumes control of a seized ship in order to secure the crew, the cargo, and the vessel. And disposition of that first vessel is still pending. The next interdiction occurred on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, 22 April.